Okay, so we'll make a start. So this is Unit 4 that we're going to do today. So we've already done symmetric key, hashing methods. Now we're going to do public key encryption. So every week we introduce a new topic that really should hopefully build the foundation for your understanding. We've still got to do key exchange and digital signatures. So we don't see the full picture just now. There's a lot. How do you cover public key encryption in 2 hours? Impossible. How do you give some practical hands-on experience? Impossible. But I'll try to give you a heads up on an understanding. I'm not going to go into the mathematics of it. I will do enough so you understand how each of the techniques actually works, but I won't go into the detail of the maths and the proofs and so on. If you're interested, I can certainly give you an outline of that. But we'll try to understand each of the important methods and how they operate, and hopefully understand where they're used. Such an important unit, and hopefully you'll be able to build a foundation. Hello, to be able to understand public key encryption. Okay, so if you've got any questions as we go along, then just please ask, and I'll try and help. Okay, so the main topics that we're going to cover are the basics. What is public key? What does it involve? And we'll find it involves two keys, a key pair, a public key that you can show everybody, and a private key that's kept secret. You should never release your private key, or you could lose your identity. You could use your bitcoins. You could people could log into your cloud with a single breach of your key. We log into GitHub using our private key. We log into the clouds with SSH using our private key. So if you lose your private key, then you are in trouble. In fact, the most costly cybersecurity breach of all is a breach of your trust infrastructure. If someone gets hold of this key here, you're in big trouble. You've got to tell the world that this key is now revoked. That's a bit embarrassing to do that. You'll find that your mobile phone app for your bank is updated quite regularly because they're changing the keys all the time. A bank might have, or is likely to have, hundreds of thousands of these key pairs that it's got to manage. A loss of one key, or the possibility of it being lost, can cause so much damage. You have no idea. It happened with RSA. RSA got their keys breached, and Lockheed Martin shut the whole company down for 2-3 days. Shut the whole company down, massive company, and they tried to find every single occurrence. You imagine how much that cost of the keys that were used to sign things and to verify. It's a very, very costly thing. And if you've got Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, if you lose your private key, then you're going to lose you're likely to use your cryptocurrency. You want a key? Want a key? You want a key? Not that key. That you can have that key. Okay, I'm going to lock the door. There you go, locked. Okay, so we're going to look at public key encryption and what these magical little keys actually do. Then we'll look at the main methods that are used for public key encryption. RSA, it's been around for 4 decades, and it's still used. It's still going strong. It's an amazing method. We'll cover elliptic curve, the savior of cybersecurity. If it wasn't for elliptic curve, we'd be really struggling. Bitcoin, Tor, you name it, they use elliptic curve. And when we look at key exchange, we'll look at what's called the elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman method and see how elliptic curves are used to exchange keys between Bob and Alice. Then we'll look at just a little bit on the El-Gamal method and see how that's used. And then in the end, we'll see how we use the HSM, the hardware security module in the cloud. Because most of what we do now is in the cloud. Where are you going to keep your keys? Not on premise anymore. Well, if you're a bank, then maybe you do. But in most cases, you will store them in AWS or Azure or Google within an HSM, and we use the key management system for that. So those are the areas that we're going to cover. We've got Bruce coming along next week. Wow. We've got Bruce and Bruce Snyer and Troy Hunt. It's a bit difficult. He said yes, but obviously he's on Australian time and we're on UK time. So I'm going to try and arrange just a 30-minute catch up with Troy Hunt. Remember we talked about Have I Been Pawned? He has a cool site just now on all the silly passwords that, the password rules that sites actually has. I think I posted the link. Okay, so next week is Bruce. So I learned all about public key encryption from that book. It's probably a bit out of date now. So I read that book and he talked about public key encryption and I was totally hooked. He showed a new world of trust. The internet there we'd created was flawed and we needed to build a new world around these public key encryption methods. And it was Rivest, Shamir, and Edelman who actually made this work. In between, before this, there was Whitfield Diffie and Marty Hellman, who published a paper, we'll talk about it next week, about key exchange. But in that paper, they talked about the possibility of public key encryption, that we can create a trapdoor. And a trapdoor means that if I encrypt, then there's a trapdoor in the method so that when I apply a key, it falls through. But for most people, it's too difficult. If they don't know this private key, then the trapdoor doesn't work for them and the computation is just too difficult. So it moves away from our symmetric key, where I can now create any key. I can create a new key pair now, and you can send me a message. I can send you the public key. That's a problem, of course, and we'll come across these little pesky little things called digital certificates that hold these public keys. But it's a problem. I've posted my public key on my website, so hopefully it's quite trustworthy. As long as it's not been hacked, then you can kind of trust that. But if I send you an email, can you trust that? Probably not. Somebody could send you saying, hello, this is the professor, here's my public key, send me all your bitcoins and so on. So we'll come back onto this, that we need these things called digital certificates to make sure that my public key is trustworthy and you can use it. So is this paper here from Rivest, Shamir, and Edelman that allowed that to happen. I'll post a little video. I'll post a little video on Leonard Edelman after the lecture. Okay, so there they are. There's the three from there. Anybody know who the first one is? Want to take a guess? Shamir, what was that? So which one, first one there with the beard, do you think? The guess? The middle one. Who's the middle one? What was it? Who is it? Sorry? No, the middle one is reversed. The middle one is reversed. And this is Shamir on the left there. We have reversed and Edelman, okay, all looking very young then. There. And it's quite funny because in the paper, they outline this table here, which is farcical. Farcical. 200 digits. The middle one is I wish it was me. I wish it was me. I wish it was me. I would have earned $1 million from the prize. So these guys were given $1 million because of their amazing work. They won the Nobel Prize of computing for that. And I will be meeting Marty Hellman later in the module. He won that prize too. So we'll do that. So I don't have glasses, so that's the difference. Okay, maybe I should say it was me. I'm Satoshi Nakamoto. So, and I can reveal my private key. If anybody knows Satoshi, then if you can find that private key, there's a lot of Bitcoins that are waiting to be used. So if you find out who that person is, then give me a call. So it's quite funny. In the paper, 200 digits we're going to take to do with factorization of two prime numbers and the difficulty of that. In the paper, they talk about 200 digits taking 3.8 times 10 to the 9 years. That's a long time. We'll all be dead. I know that sounds really sad, but we'll be well dead. These days, no problem. 200 digits. So in 1978, the computing problem looked really difficult. Today, nothing. So the key sizes have actually changed a great deal. And it was in this paper that we first saw the concept of A and B, or Bob and Alice. So in here, in the paper, it says, suppose we have A and B, also known as Alice and Bob. That was the first time we saw it. And it was Bruce Snyer who came up with Carol, Dave, Eve, Faith, Grace, I can't remember H, Hector, we'll call her, H, I, Jai, and so on. That's not Bob and Alice, of course. Okay, that's a bit more scary. And that's certainly not Bob and Alice. I just wonder if that's where the motivation for Bob and Alice and Carol came from. Ted doesn't exist, of course. That is a really bad movie, by the way. Please don't watch that movie. It's terrible. So there's the three people, the three groups who created this amazing public key encryption method. Shamir, not me, and Edelman. Okay, Audie Shamir, Ron Revest, and Len Edelman. And then we have Tahir El Gamal, fantastic, amazing researcher. I've posted a video. We had a chat with him just before the new year there, and he's such a nice person. He's the chief security architect for SAS just now, but he created the El Gamal method. Actually, it's quite well used these days in some of the methods that we use for homomorphic encryption, but we'll come back onto that later. And two people here created elliptic curves. They didn't create them together, they created them at the same time. Just like who created public key encryption? Who created it? I've told you a little fib here, a little lie, possibly. Who actually created public key encryption? Was it in the US? Was it in the UK? It was actually possibly, at GCHQ. And there were researchers there who actually created it, because GCHQ is a defense agency, they kept it quiet. Unfortunately, it was many, many years after it that it was actually announced that they created it, actually even before Ravesh Shamir and Edelman. So there is some debate about it, and it might have been GCHQ who actually created it, or the researchers there. So we've got Niall and Victor, who created elliptic curve around the same time, and they came up with it independently. Next week, we're going to be talking to Niall on his methods. But those are the three main methods that we're going to have a look at today. RSA, elliptic curve, and Elgamal. Unfortunately, they're under threat. So if I was to give this lecture in 10 years' time, probably I would be giving a completely different lecture and say, remember those public key encryption methods? They were rubbish. That quantum computer there in the corner that's making my tea actually can crack your Bitcoin wallet in an instance. So we have a big problem in that all of the methods, all three, are cracked by quantum computers. Quantum computers don't do everything, but they are really good at cracking those three methods. So we have a decade possibly, and the Chinese and the Americans it's a race just now. It's a real race to be the first to develop a quantum computer that can, guess what, crack crypto. Why? Because they want to spy on others. So quantum computers are a great risk. And the US, Biden, said that they want to get rid of every single piece of existing public key and replace it with post-quantum crypto. That's like the year 2000 bug times a million. Seek out every single place where there's RSA, elliptic curve, and discrete logs, and get rid of it and replace it with a lattice method. So every browser here will have to change. The way they're doing it just now is with what's called a hybrid method. If you're using Google Chrome, there's a possibility, hello, that you could be using a hybrid method of key exchange. It's using lattice, it's also using elliptic curve at the same time. And you would drop one, if one gets hacked, then you would drop one in favor for the other. That's the way that we generally migrate our cryptography, is that we'll cope with something and we'll deprecate it and it will run for a while. And it was Peter Shaw who did the classic paper that killed crypto. Who killed crypto? And he wrote a paper that outlined the method of cracking RSA and elliptic curve and discrete logs. And they were finished. So the race is now on to be able to implement this. And there was a paper recently from Chinese researchers. And if you came along to the talk last week, I think there was some debate about the validity of that paper, cracking RSA using a quantum computer. And it wasn't using Shor's method that we have. Okay, so that's the risk that we face. And luckily, NIST have been looking at this and have created the post-quantum cryptography standards. And they're based around what are called lattices. I'll try to explain lattices to you later on, but they can be a lot more difficult to understand than the methods that I'm going to outline. But there are two methods which are proposed at the current time. One is called crystals, and the other one's called dilithium. Sorry, Kyber. One's called Kyber, and the other one's called dilithium. You'll see these methods implemented for key exchange and also for public key encryption in the next few years. And it's a really great area to get into. One of Google's companies is developing post-quantum crypto, and they got 500 million of investment just this week, 500 million. So that shows you whoever can build up the expertise in migrating from the existing encryption, to the post-quantum could really do very well. The banks, Bitcoin's got to change, Ethereum, all your wallets, all your identity, your YubiKey that you use to log in, it's all going to be broken by quantum computers. And it was these three people in the 80s who took the idea of public key encryption and developed it further. Eric Hughes, Timothy May, and John Gilmore. And they created the cyberpunk, they were the cypherpunks of the world, and they called for the Crypto Anarchist Manifesto. The term crypto has been hijacked a bit for cryptocurrency, but they meant it in the wider sense of cryptography or public key cryptography. And the good thing was that you actually find that they also posted their public key just to show that they actually used it. And it was in there, they said that we'll revolutionize our world. We'll be using public key encryption, zero knowledge proofs, and we'll improve our interaction, authentication, and verification. And they outlined that really trust and reputation would change. And Bruce Nair also talks about this too. He said the first thing we did as a human species was that we trusted each other. So the only way we really have developed initially as a society, how we moved from being animals, was trust. We started to trust each other and live in societies. And his viewpoint is that that's gone. In a digital world, you can't trust anything. All the systems we've created really are almost trustless. I mean, we need to integrate trust more, and one of the best ways is with public key encryption. The state will, of course, try to slow or halt the spread of the technology. That's a scary statement. The state, who's the state? Is this Big Brother, George Orwell? The state doesn't like public key encryption. And states around the world are wrestling with cryptocurrency because it takes away the power of the mighty dollar and the pound and the yen, and it decentralizes it. So the power that governments and the state had at one time could be broken with one little thing, public key encryption. In the US, I think today, they've published in one state that it's not, you don't have to reveal your private key. I think in the UK, if I hide my private key from law enforcement, then I could probably go to prison and I'll be charged. My private key is also my biometric and so on. If I have a wallet and the police want to access that, I might say no. I think in the UK and in many countries in the world, legally, I have to reveal my private key. But some countries in the world, some states are saying, I don't have to do that. You can't force me. I don't know if you've ever seen the dead man finger. Actually, someone's dead. They've been killed. Maybe they've shot someone and so on. And the iPhone is there. The iPhone, and then actually put the finger onto the it's a horrible, scary thought. But that is, I think, legal. It is legal, or you must comply with laws to be able to reveal your private key or your secret. And of course, it says it will enable drug dealers and tax dodgers and all the bad people to do bad things. But at the same time, it allows us to be able to trust our email, trust our communications, and so on. So end-to-end encryption is a real difficult area because society wants to protect society, but individuals have the rights to privacy. And they said just as the medieval guilds, there was the Tolpuddle martyrs in the UK who smashed up the machines because they were against it, but nothing could stop the rise. And if you look at Bitcoin, 13, 14 years it's run. Nobody's really done much to it. Just keeps running. So it'll be very difficult to stop. And the UK now is looking at a UK tethered cryptocurrency. Tethered means that somebody has enough money somewhere to back all of the tokens that are issued, just like a normal bank. I know that doesn't happen. Really, the US can produce dollars, and if everybody asks for all the dollars back, they don't have enough gold to back it up. But they have enough, so there isn't a run on it. So now we're looking at tethered cryptocurrency. First time we have trust, and it's not paper. So let's look at some of the basics behind it. So as I said, we have a public key and we have a private key. So the public key, just need to get my key pair. The public key goes with the private key. Okay, so I've got Bob's private key and I've got Bob's public key there. Okay, so the public key isn't like this, it's like a padlock. Really, I can distribute my padlock to everybody here, and you can use my padlock and lock a box for me. Then the only key that will open that is the private key. Okay, so I've drawn it like a padlock, but then the private key or the secret key is, I've just drawn that as a little key there. So the three main areas that we actually use our public key encryption is with encryption itself, just like with symmetric key, we use that. So if Bob wants to send Alice some data, she sends over her public key. Bob then encrypts with her public key, sends it over, and she then takes her private key, which is associated with her public key, and then can decrypt the data. This is encryption, okay? Just like symmetric key, but a lot slower. Okay, so symmetric key was very efficient, 16 bytes, small blocks and things like that. This is a lot more processing that goes on. So we typically use this for small amounts of data, as we'll see later. Another way is to digitally sign something, and this is where public key encryption comes into its own. With this again, with this, Alice is signing with her private key. So she takes some data and she signs the data, sends it over, and she also forwards over her public key to Bob, and Bob checks the signature on the data to make sure that it was Alice who actually signed it. And that's an amazing concept that we can actually say, this email that I sent you has been signed by me. I can prove it to you. The third method is for key exchange. Bob wants Alice to use that key. So Bob uses, let's see, this is Google. Okay. Bob wants to connect to Google and he wants to use the key that's identified there. Alice sends over her public key. Bob then encrypts that public key with her that symmetric key. with her public key, sends it over, and then it's her private key that then reveals the shared key. After this, they can quite happily communicate with each other. Okay, so it's encryption, it's signing, and it's key exchange. Those are the main areas that public key is applied into. So there's public key encryption. There's a key pair. We use Alice's public key. We need to get it in a trustworthy form to encrypt. And then Alice will then use her private key. Even Bob can't get into that message anymore. Once he's encrypted with her public key, there is no way that even he can get in and decrypt again. We also sign, and this is one of the main usages, of the method. And in this case, what we do is that we use our private key to digitally sign a message. And then our public key is used to prove it. So in this case, we can see here, we take the public key. This is the method that's used in Bitcoin called ECDSA, elliptic curve digital signature algorithm. So we can see here that Bob signs a hash of the message to create a signature. If you're interested, creates an R and an S value there. He sends the signature over with the message. Alice takes a hash of the message too, and then uses Bob's public key to be able to verify the signature. And in this way, we can prove that it was Bob who actually signed the message. As long as Bob's private key isn't compromised, then everything's fine. Only he can actually have that private key. ECDSA, EDDSA, RSA, and DSA are the main methods that we can have for digital signatures. LGAML is another one, but it's not used that much. And then the other one is where Bob wants Alice to use the same key. So Alice sends over her public keys. So let's say that Alice is Google and Bob is connecting to Google. Google sends over the digital certificate. The digital certificate from Google contains their public key. Okay, we just check. Yeah, that's Google. Everything's fine. Okay, you're okay. Okay, there's your public key there. Google, thanks very much. I'll pop that public key off. And then we encrypt the key that we want to use for your HTTPS connection with Alice's public key. And now they're both using the same key. This was used up to TLS 1.2, but it's gone. In TLS 1.3, it is no more. Can anybody see the flaw in this method? Why has it been dropped in TLS 1.3, do you think? What's the flaw here? I appreciate we've not covered key exchange yet. We'll do that next week. But can anybody spot the flaw in this method? It's a different key every time. So every time Bob logs on to Google, he'll get a different key. So every session you create, it's a new key, and it's a completely random key. So it's a good answer. You were getting there, but not quite the right one. The flaw here is if someone hacks Google's private key or Alice's private key. What's that going to do for all the keys in the past? What's that? Say again? Again, it's passed, yeah. It's passed through the tunnel. But if I've been listening to all the communications back and forward, and I now have Google's private key or Alice's private key, what can I now do? You know Alice's private key now. Not quite, no. I can now reveal all of the keys that Bob and Alice have used in the past. I'll show you Wireshark. It's not that difficult. If I record all of your communications, and I can assure you it does happen, there's somebody somewhere recording all of our communications. If I get hold of Alice's private key, I can decrypt every single key that they've used for their tunnel in the past. And I can assure that there are some areas of the world that that's a standard thing. If I'm using public key encryption, I've got to give you my private key so that someone somewhere can decrypt all of the traffic. And you've heard some countries of the world have a Great Wall of firewall, and they make sure that there isn't ways out of the country. You need to go through this part, and possibly it can be, and especially if you need to register your key pair with someone. So if it's against the law, I know there's some countries that you can't even use Skype or WhatsApp, or you'll end up in prison because it's end-to-end encryption. So it's been dropped now, and the reason it's been dropped is that it is open to that type of attack. So there's the three methods. As I said, I won't go into the maths of it, just enough to understand them. But basically, the three main methods that we've got are integer factorization. We take two prime numbers, P and Q, we multiply them together, and we get a public modulus called N. I can tell everybody what that is. It's not a secret, but you won't be able to factorize that into P and Q unless you have some amazing, fantastic computer. As we saw, you need to boil all the oceans on the planet to crack that. We can have discrete logs, and I'll explain a bit more about that next week. This is the private key. This is what's called the generator. G to the power of x mod of a prime number. That's discrete logs method. And the third method is elliptic curve relationships. It's used in smart cards, your bank card, IoT, Tor, Bitcoin, you name it, it's elliptic curve these days. Okay, and so this is what we looked at before. So let's go down until we can pay the electricity bill. Does that look okay? Could you pay the electricity bill for that one? Yep. This one? Yeah. You can pay for a shower, hopefully. Pay for a swimming pool? Kinda, yeah. Pay for boiling the rain? Bit more difficult. Okay, we'll stop here. Okay, so obviously if you're the NSA and GCHQ and so on, then you can maybe afford that. It's going to be very costly to boil the water of a lake to crack just one key. So there we are. The break point for RSA happens somewhere about 1K. I think we're up to about 800 bits or so for cracking. So 1K is the recommended limit. So let's actually double that just in case. 2048-bit is probably what you're using for all your connections to your banks. Your banks might be using 4K, but most of the websites that you're connecting to are 2K RSA keys. So that's where we are with that, and but it could be cracked tomorrow. Someone could find a new method, and just as the Chinese researchers have done, then perhaps it's gone. So those are the three methods that we have: RSA, elliptic curve, and L-gamma. I'll explain this in a little minute, but basically two prime numbers, we use to cipher, we take the message to the power of an E value, then we take the cipher, raise it to the power of D, a decipher value, and this mod N, and that's all we do for our encryption and decryption process. ECC elliptic curve is a bit more difficult, but I'll explain it. And then this is the form. As we are in John Napier's university here, then this is logs, but made discrete. Okay, go ahead. Yeah. Between public key and
public key methods and public key encryption methods.
Oh, they're the same. They're the same. Yeah, yeah. So I talk about them interchangeably. I should really talk about them as asymmetric methods. Public key can be used to encrypt. Public key can be used to sign, and public key can be used to key exchange. So I think that's where the confusion has come in. These three methods, I'll explain this. This can be used to encrypt. This can be used to sign. This can be used to encrypt and sign. This can be used not to encrypt, but only to sign. I appreciate that's a bit confusing. So when I talk about encryption, it means I encrypt data and you can decrypt it. When I talk about signing, then that's the sign. It's not actually an encryption process. Does that answer your question? Hopefully. Sorry for that confusion. Okay, so let's look at the wonderfulness of RSA, the RSA method. So as I said, it was Whitfield, Diffie, and Marty Hellman who came up with the idea that public key encryption could exist. It was created in GCHQ around the same time. And it was Shamir, Revest, and Edelman who actually created the first method. They patented it at the time, but it's now out of patent. 1977. Anybody born in 1977? Good for you. That's 1977. That's very good. So that was by Revest, Shamir, and Edelman. Just a wonderful thing. Right then, so I'm going to show you how it works. Okay, don't be scared. Honestly, it's not that difficult. And if you're doing any CTFs or cracking, then actually there's quite a few CTFs that you can do. Oh, by the way, there's a CTF out just now. It'd be really good if you could get a group together. I think I published it on the Teams site. If you want any help in preparing for CTFs and so on, then just give us a shout. Okay, so here's the method. Take two prime numbers. What's your favorite prime number? What is it? Not sure. 2. Oh, that's such a boring prime number. It's a crypto. Okay, there's a crypto joke. What's the shortest book? The shortest book in the world. Shortest even prime numbers. You open it up and it says 2. End of book. No, that's not a very funny joke. I know. 2 is a very boring one, but 2 is a prime number. It's the only even prime number. Give me another one. 3. Oh, that's another boring one. For goodness sake, give me 5. You're giving me such boring prime numbers. What was it? 21. Oh, 71. 29? No, that's... My favorite one is 97, okay? Or 997. And I remember 2 to the power of 19 minus 1, okay? There's I'll get this wrong. There's prime numbers that are 2 to the power of a number minus 1. 2 to the power of 19 minus 1 is a prime number. I think 2 to the power of 17 is also the same. So we take two prime numbers together, and these are special magical numbers. We create a public modulus, and that can be told to anybody. I appreciate that's too easy in this case. We then work out what's called a phi value. Come in. And we take p minus 1 times q minus 1 and multiply them together. If a hacker can find that, you're toast. I mean, really, your data is lost and you've lost your keys. So we work out that that's 20 in this case, if we take 3 and 11. We then pick a value of E that doesn't share a factor with phi. So the factors of phi are 2, 4, 5, 6, and so on. So we can pick 3, that's safe. We then find the value that when we multiply D times E, we take mod of 20 equals 1. We could search through, and eventually we'll find that 7 times 3 is 21, mod 20 is 1. So we found our decryption key. So our encryption key is 333, and our decryption key is 733. So let's see if this works. Okay, we'll try it out. We'll take a value of 5. There we go. And we'll encrypt by 5 to the power of 3 mod 33. That was our public modulus 26. We then take 26, raise it to the power of 7, and we've got our value back again. Okay, so that's RSA. Isn't that beautiful? And it's in the way that it actually works. So I managed to do it in 12 lines of Python. Okay, there's 12 lines of Python. I've never counted it, but I just say it's 12 lines of Python. It's roughly 12 lines of Python in there. Most of it is just doing some general things in there. So let's actually give it a little try, just so I'm not cheating here. So I'll open up my Python and give me some good prime numbers that aren't 2 or 3. Anyone? What's that? 17 and 97. Yeah, good for you. That's great. And we calculate the public modulus from there. Okay, if we want to have a look, don't look, but that's public. Well, we can look. That's great. So I appreciate that's a very small number. It wouldn't take you that long to factorize that, and there are tools online to do it for you. So, but imagine that was a really big prime number. And the prime numbers we use are 1,000 bits long. These are massive numbers. It'd be too difficult for you to crack it. Okay, we then work out phi, which is p minus 1 times q minus 1. Okay, we'll just print that out to see what it looks like, and that's the number there. Okay, and it's with this value now, we can now crack, or we can create our keys. So let's just take a value, and I'll go for the value of 3 there. I just hope. Is that a good one? No, it's not. So let's go for 5. Let's go for 5. So I'm going to take an encryption of an encryption key of 5. I'm going to use a little library here called libnum. Oh, no. I'm actually going to show you Python 3.5, which had a new method to calculate the D value. So D is equal to the power of E to the power of minus 1. Okay, it's taken the inverse of E. It's a new thing in Python. Rather than me using this one over here, this inverse mod there, this is a new thing in Python. It's really cool. Hopefully this is going to work. And I do the inverse of E mod phi. Okay, so let's see what that looks like. There we go. Okay, so what's my encryption key? Tell me the two numbers. What's it? What's my encryption key? 17. Sorry? 5 and 1649. Yeah. And my private key is 12 at 1229 and 1649. Okay, So just so I'm not cheating here, a number, any number, but don't go over, let's something between 1 and 100. 19, oh, you sure? No, pick another one. It's okay, we'll go 19. Okay, so that's our message, okay? So the cipher is equal to what? Okay, m to the power of 5e, yeah, mod n. Well done, yeah. I could do all that double star stuff with Python. Don't do that. Smoke will come out your computer if you do that, okay? Don't do that. I'll do it later, and you'll see my MacBook will burn. Okay. Don't do that. We do how m to the power of n mod n is what we're doing here, okay? You sure you want to still go with 19? You can change it if you want. No, it's okay. Oh. Okay, so we'll just print that out. I'm a bit worried here. Does anybody want to put a bet that this is going to work? You want to put a bet? I think 19 was a safe. Okay, we get a value of 950, okay? So I now want to decrypt this. So I'm going to decrypt. So how do we decrypt? C of power of D mod n. Okay? Are you still wanting to stick with 19? Okay. Okay. I'll probably lose my professorship and my OBE and everything if I get this wrong, okay? So I'm putting my reputation on the line here. Pretty bad. You sure you don't want to change? I'll give you the last chance here. Okay, 19 was a difficult one. We all know 19 was a difficult one. Okay, I'm just trying to I need some willpower from you all. Okay, I need you to think of the number. What number do you think it will appear? 19? You sure? That was the average age of the soldier who went to Vietnam. Did you know that? Okay, I didn't prime you, honestly. I didn't. Okay, so I need all your will and might that this is going to be 19. Okay, 19. My professorship, OBE, and everything rely on that. Oh, there we go. I thought it said 10. Okay, I'm still a professor. Okay, I'm still, so that's good. And we got the value of 19. Okay, good. My reputation was on the line, and that did give you the chance to change. You could have picked any number that you want, but it actually works. Okay, so thank you for the willpower that you made there, but it wasn't really you. It was Ravesh, Shamir, and Edelman who did this for us. Isn't that beautiful? How simple that is? It's just absolutely wonderful. And it's really difficult to crack it. But I can give you some challenges if you want to crack this, but they've got to be small prime numbers from there. To give you an idea of what they actually look like, so p to the power of, let's say, 1024, oops, is like that. And then q, we'll just make q 2 to the power of 120. I know it's not a prime number. If we multiply them together, then we get a really large number in there. And the computer has got to go and try and find the two prime numbers that come together to be able to create that value. And it's really difficult. But a quantum computer does that for breakfast. I mean, it's is nothing to do this. So that Peter Shaw outlined the way to actually do this. So I'm so glad. I'm so glad that actually worked there. Okay, so when you create your keys, you can use OpenSSL, you can use GPT, GPG to do this. But this is what your key kind of looks like. It's got that. If I send you an email and it's got that in it, it means it's cipher. Or sure. I think 3 people have sent me their public key today. So could you all generate a key pair and send me a public key, and I'll send you back an encrypted message that none of you will be able to read, by the way. So that's what the key looks like when we put it in this PEM format to base 64, and it has all this in it here. So there we go. That's what we've got. We're using 1024-bit keys here. So if we look at our keys themselves, we see there is the public modulus. If you would count the bytes, you would actually get that that's 1024 bits there. P and Q is here. Why are these smaller than that one? Why does the public modulus look so much bigger than P and Q? Anyone want to guess? Well, they multiply together. That times that equals that. It's like when you multiply 2 numbers that have, say, 16 bits each, you get a 32-bit result. So the modulus is there. Here is the E value, and the E value is typically always, these days, the value of 65537. That's what everybody uses. It's fairly secure. Everything's fine. When you use RSA here, you'll be using that value. But this value here is your D value and will change. And basically, it's this. It's the S to the power of -1 mod of phi. So if you take these 2 values, take one away from them, multiply them, then you'll do that to be able to recover this value here. Okay, so there's our E value here. There's a D value there. That's what an encrypted message can look like, because we need to send them by email or in a text format. So they'll look a bit like that. So how could we communicate? Well, what we do is we have a keyring. So I'll show you my keyring. So if I got my keyring here. So this is my keyring here. I've added a few of your public keys on there. So you can see there's my public and private key, but I've added in some student keys there. Each one has a fingerprint, and I've got their public key in there. And there's a file on the system that will store the public keys and my private key. So I create a keyring. I put my public key and private key on the keyring so that I can just quickly take the keys off. I just need to identify the name or an email address, and it will automatically pick the right keys. So if I'm communicating with Alice, then I get Alice's public key, I put it on my keyring, and then whenever I want to encrypt data for her, then I can do it from there. One way we can do this is with GPG. And GPG is a nice little program that allows you to be able to create your keys. So just let me create a key. Yep. And we'll do this in the lab today, hopefully. I can just exit from Python. Okay, so we'll call it Bob. And we'll call it Bobby. And Bob at home.com. Oops, I've lost my characters. Okay, no, that's fine. We'll go with that. Change the name or okay. That's fine. And we'll give it a passphrase, nice and secure. Okay, you've entered an insecure. Yeah, I kind of know that. So I'll just take that one on. Fine. Creates a bit of entropy. It creates an entropy, some randomization, usually from the operating system, and it will create the key pair for me here. So we can see here, I now have a new key pair that we can actually look at. On a Windows machine, this is where your secret keys are stored in your roaming folder, if you're admin, and then there's your public keyring there with a GPG after it at the end. We can then export the public key that we've just created. So I just need to call it the name that I've given it, and I think it was Bobby. Okay, and we'll just have a look at my public key, and there it's there. Okay, so I can send you that now. You can use that. So you can copy and paste that into whatever system that you want, and you can add that onto your own keyring. And then from there, we should be able to encrypt our data. And if we want to import someone else's public key from the command line, we can just import the key. And then once the key is created, then you basically give your basically encrypt with -E here with your name and the name on the public key. And this is the file that we're going to encrypt there. And then eventually we should be able to just do -D. So we receive what's called an ARMOR message or an ARMOR file. That's just like the format that we show over here. Once we receive that, then we decrypt it with the user's, with our private key, and it should be recovered. Okay, so we'll try and do this today. So this is used to log into GitHub. So GitHub, I log into GitHub with my private key, which is stored on my machine, and I automatically authenticate myself. Same with SSH. Whenever I use an SSH connection, I have my private key. I generate a key pair of my private key. So when I log in, I don't have to be usernames and passwords and so on. I can just log in with my private key. Okay, so that's the keyring that we have there. Hopefully we'll be able to do that. Right, okay, let's do some elliptic curve. Okay, this is a bit more challenging, and it certainly took me a long time to understand this, but once I got it, then it was really amazing. So I'm not expecting you to understand the details of this method, and I won't ask you this at all in a test. But it's important that you understand the core principles. Basically, it's a beautiful elliptic curve, and an elliptic curve has that. So if you deal with Bitcoin, then the Bitcoin curve is that. That's Bitcoin. That little magical equation is Bitcoin. So you have that, and you also have the mod of a prime number. And we use what's called the SEPT 256K1 curve for Bitcoin, if you're interested. Basically, what you have is a base point on the curve. And then what you do is that you add G plus G plus G, that's 3G, or G plus G plus G plus G is 10G. Okay, so all we do is that we keep adding. And the beautiful thing about an elliptic curve is that if I add a point to itself, I get another point. And then I keep adding, I get another point. And every point that I get will always be on the elliptic curve. It's just the way that they work. Okay, so what I then do is I have a secret key, SK, which is a random, this is my private key. And then I create a public key, which is SK times G. G is the base point. So basically it's G plus G plus G plus G, SK times. And the great thing with this is it's very, very, very efficient. Even an IoT device, even a sensor, can actually just do an elliptic curve point add or an elliptic curve double. That's all they need to do. And those are actually very easy things and are just a few lines of code that any device can actually have. Okay, so we have a point, which is G, which is our generator point. We then pick a random number, which is our private key, and then our public key becomes N times G. or the point G added n times. Curve 25519 is another curve that we use, which is quite common if you don't trust the Bitcoin curve, or if you don't trust NIST, then you can use this curve here. What it comes out like is this. I know that that's not quite as beautiful as the nice curve, but when we bring in the mod p, then we get points like this. Okay. Actually, we get 2 points for every x value. So we've got to differentiate between the two. But this is how the points are created. So when we keep adding the points, we get a new point on there. And it's actually a really difficult challenge if I have that and I have that to be able to determine what that actually is. If I'm on a point on the elliptic curve, I can't tell what the previous 2 points have been to get to that point. That's the difficulty in this overall. So we'll come back onto this, but it's used in Bitcoin. So in Bitcoin, we create a private key. We then take what's called an elliptic curve digital signature of it, ECDSA. That's then hashed, and this is our public ID for Bitcoin. So if you want to send me Bitcoins, I would give you that address there. So it's a wonderful way of generating a public ID. I don't have to publish my public key or anything. I just have to generate my own private key, and then I can publicize my address here. And it's through the magic of elliptic curve that actually happens. Okay, we'll come back onto this, but basically, Bob finds out what Alice's public identifier is. He wants to pay 10 Bitcoins. He basically takes his private key and signs that transaction to say that that was him. And everyone else can actually prove that it was Bob that actually signed that through Bob's public address. A wonderful mechanism. So for signing, what we have is the private key signing a hash and the public key proving it. As we'll find out, how do you know what communication channel can you trust? You could come from my website and you would trust that, but would you trust an email that says here's Bill's public key? No. So the way that we normally distribute our public keys is through Trent. Trent is there to take Bob's public key, and Trent also signs it with his private key, and I'll explain that later, and then gives it to Alice. Alice gets it and says, oh yeah, Trent signed it, that's fine, looks okay, that must be Bob's public key. So when we look at digital certificates, we'll come back onto this as a basic concept. But that's the one thing, how do we get the public key to Alice in a trustworthy form so that we know that Eve hasn't sent it? Okay, so in the lab today, we'll create our own key pair. So here's an example using the SEPT 256 key 1 curve that Bitcoin uses. And it produces a file like this. This here is the private key. So it's a lot smaller than RSA. Elliptic curve is just tiny in comparison. This has the parameters of the elliptic curve that we're using, just in case the other side doesn't know what elliptic curve we're using. And that has the private key in it there. And I can distribute that to you, and you can store that in a wallet. If we then expand that out, we actually see the details of the key itself. So there's the private key, 256 bits, hopefully it's random, and there's the public key. The public key is an XY point. So it has 512 bits. Actually, there's a 04 at the start. That's not part of the key. It says it's an uncompressed point. The X value is stored in here. There's the X value. And then the Y value is somewhere in here. So this is a point actually on the elliptic curve. The 4 is just an identifier. If you count the number of bytes there, you'll get 512 for that point. Okay, so there's another example there. It's roughly the same example. And then when we look at the parameters that we have in an elliptic curve, as I said, the basic elliptic curve is this mod P. Okay, that's the basic curve. There's the value of A. There's the value of B. There's the prime number. There's the G value or the generator that we need. And there's one little thing called the order. Not all the points are valid on an elliptic curve. There are spaces. The order defines the total number of points that are possible on the whole space. This really defines the security that we have. So that's the core parameters that we have for elliptic curve methods. As we'll find next week, we use this often in key exchange. This is an example of the Tor network that you might use sometimes. Anybody use Tor at all? Yeah, some people. Obviously, it takes different routes. And for this, each of the Tor nodes generates an encryption key, symmetric key. And it does that through a key exchange method using an elliptic curve. So each of the nodes negotiates with Bob what key they're using. So I've colored the keys with different colors there. And then Bob encrypts with the red key, encrypts with the green key, and encrypts with the purple key. We hit the first node, and the first node takes its encryption key off, and we get that. Passes it on. Then the next node will take its key off, and it still can't see the data because it's encrypted in there. So it'll take that key off and then pass it over here. The last one is called, does anybody know what that node is called? What's the last node in a Tor network? This is the entry point here. Do you know what that one's called? That's the exit node, okay? It might be in Sweden or Germany or China even. Whatever IP address that is, that's what's going to appear in the log of the website that you're going to access. So the last node unencrypts and the data is now plain. But we typically overlay HTTPS, so you're okay. The data is still encrypted. There's a Bitcoin hack called a mixer. If you were looking for a dissertation, people were sitting here and stealing people's Bitcoins. A really bad hack because your Bitcoins just disappear into free space because of this exit node here. So that uses an elliptic curve method that I'll explain next week. So the typical curves that we use, curve 25519, SEP256 key 1 is used in Bitcoin, and P256 is the NIST standard curve. These lead to these signatures and to these key exchange methods. If we want more security, we can get a bigger curve. These are larger and they're more secure. But most of the time, this is enough security that we need. The last method is OutGamL, and I won't go into any detail here. Uses discrete logs. We'll be coming back to that next week. So let's look at the full picture. And there is a method called PGP. What does PGP stand for? Pretty good privacy. It was created by Phil Zinnerman because he questioned why we use email and it's still not trustworthy. So the way that we do this, and I've even got electrical tape. See, I've got my I got my electrical tape, but I'll do my electrical tape later when we cover digital signatures. But let's say that Bob has a public and a private key, yellow and green here. Okay, so Bob creates a symmetric key that he's going to use because public key encryption isn't good for lots of data. If this is a movie he's sending to Alice, it's just not going to happen. So he creates a new symmetric key. He then encrypts, he takes the signature and signs it with his private key. Okay, the yellow one there. I've got the keys wrong. Well, let's say this is the secret key. Okay, so he signs the signature and puts them together with the message and with the signature. He then takes Alice's public key, and encrypts the symmetric key that he's used there. I'm then going to send that over to Alice. Alice will then examine the key that's been encrypted here. And what key will decrypt that key? Alice's private key. Okay, so she can take her private key, she can then decrypt it. She now has the symmetric key that's been used. She can then open the box, read the message. So she now has a signature there. She now looks at the signature and she takes Bob's public key and checks the signature on the hash. If it works, then she knows that it was Bob who actually sent the message. So we have security, privacy, we have integrity through the hashing process and the signatures, and we have an identity check on the message. Perfect. Why isn't it adopted? Who knows? Because some people don't want you to be private. I don't know if you knew that, but some people quite happy that they can look at emails and so on. So for end-to-end encryption, you can create your own keys and you can create your own signing. Hopefully in the lab, we'll be able to do this today. So in the lab today, we'll also look, if you want, at AWS. Call it Azure, Google Cloud, doesn't matter. Most of our keys now are stored in the cloud. So how do we make sure that we can store our keys correctly without Amazon looking at them or some other tenant in the cloud? So you'll find you've got a dashboard in the KMS, and when you create your keys, if we go for public key encryption, we can see that we've only got 3 options: RSA, 2K, 3K, or 4K. You create your keys, cost about $1 a month. Okay, so if you create your keys today, just delete them or disable them and you won't get charged for the whole month. But you can create your keys, 2K, that's fine. So when it's created, I can view my public key. Okay, nothing secret. I can also use the command line to be able to view my key. So where is it actually stored? Well, it's stored in the cloud in a HSM or a hardware security module. So your private key is in there. Your public key is viewable. You can see that, but it's a chip. It's a piece of hardware that's looking after your symmetric keys and also your private keys. Okay, and it's FIPS 142 compliant, which means that an auditor has come in and made sure that Amazon AWS is storing your keys in a place that people can't get access to. But what you should remember is that this is multi-tenanted. So you share that with Peggy and Bob, and you share it with Amazon. So Amazon could go in and actually have a look at, or law enforcement or somebody, but it's cheap. It's cheap. Bob can't get access to your keys, by the way, so don't worry about that. But to save money, not everybody can have an HSM, so you share it. It's multi-tenanted. If you really are running a bank or if you're running a bank or a security infrastructure, you want to go for a single tenant approach. It's going to cost you quite a lot of money, but at least you know that that unit is yours, and even Amazon AWS can't get into it. So we can go for a multi-tenanted, a single tenanted approach. But if you're really still scared, you can go for an on-premise place to store your keys. So if you don't trust AWS or Azure, you can actually have your on-premise. And if you run a bank, then it's likely that you'll be running an on-premise key store here. And all your private keys and your symmetric keys are stored away, physically away from the cloud infrastructure that you have. So try and do a bit of AWS if you can and see how these things are actually set up.